Greetings, my name is Brian Thompson. I'm part of the Hybrid Cloud BU, and I'm excited to have David Estes with me here today.
Thanks for having me.
We are going to give you a bit of a view into our new HPE VM Essentials solution, which we're really excited about to bring to market, delivering virtualization capabilities similar to what a customer might consume from VMware or other offerings of that nature. David, hoping we could use this as an opportunity to really make it tangible and walk through the graphical interface, give people a feel for the features and capabilities of this new platform offering.
Great, yeah, let's dig in. I think we could dive in a little deeper here on this video and give you some of the little nitty-gritty details as we go through. So I'm actually going to go into provisioning instances to start. This is our dashboard, so it's kind of just showing you the health of the system, all that type of stuff. We're going to drill into instances, though, to get started. You can see one thing I want to highlight here in this environment, we've been talking about it, is you've got both VMware and HPE VM Essentials in the same pane of glass. So I can actually deploy to my VMware, inventory and ingest my VMware, as well as deploy VM Essentials VMs.
So in this example, you've got a cluster that you've built out running the HPE VM Essentials as a hypervisor and storage mapped to it, but you've also now connected this same control plane to a running VMware vSphere environment.
Yeah.
And so you can see that, you can interact with that, ideally migrate workloads to and fro. That's fantastic. Great.
So we have vCenter right here, so you can see this vCenter cluster. It's just a small little cluster for demonstration purposes with the host, but we can kind of see how that all works together. We also have our cluster here, right? This is our HPE VM cluster running with our hypervisors. We can see some health and stuff like that. We can dig into some of the VMs, network storage, and we'll dive into this later, but I think first we should just go provision a VM.
I love it. Let's do it.
So let's go to provisioning instances and get started here. So we've got some of our instances. I'm just going to add a new one. And first off, what are we doing? Are we deploying to VMware or deploying to VM Essentials? You got both options available to you. I'm going to hit next. And the next thing you can do is you can pick a group. If you're used to VMware folders, organization, stuff like that, groups are very useful for organizing your VMs. They also allow you to do policy control. Some of the stuff you actually don't have in just base vCenter.
Right.
The cool part about this too, noticing that VMware side by side, you can actually take advantage of that with your vCenter cluster too. So you get some value proposition on top of vCenter, not just VM Essentials.
Right.
We also get to pick our cloud or clusters. You can organize and have multiple clusters and manage those in the environment. The next thing we do is we just give it a name. So I can say, hey, my HPE instance here. I can actually say it's a dev test staging, give it some labels. So you have multiple ways to organize things.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking about folders and that folder tree, don't worry, we can handle a lot of different means for you to organize these things. And you can even do policy enforcement on those as well, which is really cool. So I'm going to actually dive into configuring, right? So we can actually pick a t-shirt size, as it were, a plan. One thing to mention, you see these are fixed plans, but you may have some environments where you're like, no, I want freeform. I want to actually type how much memory I want, those types of things, how many cores. All that is available to you. In this particular case, we have it locked down, but you can actually make a plan that allows and enables customization in that way.
But as the administrator, I can choose what are the options I want to present to my users.
Exactly.
Right. So within the capacity, or how do I want to govern so nobody kind of creates a 96 core VM, right, and runs away with it.
Right.
So.
That's actually a great value prop there
Sure.
too, because if you're in IT, you're not giving your end users access to your vCenter, right? This you technically can.
Yeah,
which
if
is
you chose to enable that.
A nice bonus.
That's great.
We can pick a resource pool, or in this case, it's our cluster, right, for HPE VME. If I have multiple clusters, they would show up as resource pools. In the VMware world, which is nice, is we've kind of standardized or put commonalities across things. So if this were VMware, it's the resource pools and clusters from VMware.
Yeah. Which is great too, as we think about common concepts that a VM admin is going to be expecting or understand. They'll see those same things represented here as those capabilities.
Exactly.
Great.
So here we have a volume here, and we can actually pick where are we going to store this thing. So we actually support GFS2 clustered storage on a LUN. It can be on an HPE Alletra piece of gear, a legacy gear. It can be on a 3PAR, a Nimble. It could be on a NetApp for all we care, as long as it's exposing iSCSI or in the future fiber channel, things like that.
Great.
NFS, of course, is also available, so I can just store to NFS. We also have the ability to add more disks, right? Common request, why not, right? We can add disks, we can pick our network. One thing that's really cool about the networks, I'd love to dig into more at some point, is we actually have integrations with a lot of the major vendors that provide IP address management. So if you're like, I'm an Infoblox enterprise, or I use BlueCat, or one of those tools, you can actually link your pools to this, and it's going to do equivalent to VMware guest customizations. It's going to go reach out to IPAM and say, hey, I need an IP address for this, and it's going to automate that process end to end. Also for DNS with Microsoft DNS, Power DNS, things like that.
Yeah.
So you get a little bit of that advanced automation that comes from the Morpheus kind of
that pluggable framework
set.
with third-party integrations. That's fantastic.
Yep. And the other thing was we can pick an image here, so I can actually say, hey, I want to run Ubuntu. It's also important to note you can boot from ISO. So if you're like, hey, I don't have a template yet, I haven't built my Gold Master Windows.
Yeah.
I can actually start and build Windows right here. It automatically attaches the drivers for KVM, so you can set up your VirtIO or what they call them. And you're off to the races, and you've got that as your new Gold Master, and you just provision all day long.
So David, maybe it goes without saying, or it's obvious, but as an admin, I can actually still manage and publish essentially my library of golden images that my end users would then have access to deploy based on Windows or Linux variants or whatever I'm going to publish.
Exactly. So, for example, this is an Ubuntu 24. This is a Gold Master image we made. So I can just say, hey, I'm going to run Ubuntu 22.04. It automatically picks a plan that fits, so you can actually, it knows what its minimums are, so you don't accidentally pick the wrong thing. And I can just go on and do a few other things like user config. I can actually have it create a local user, so it's doing that. That kind of ties back into the VMware's guest customizations capability, right? It's a little bit more advanced than that, has a little bit more additional features than what VMware has in that sense. And the same thing goes for Windows. So I can do a sysprepped image and just do it from shutdown, which people who are used to OpenStack or other KVM-based solutions would see that or be used to that. But another cool feature we have is we can also do guest customization like provisioning. So maybe you didn't do sysprep and you just want to keep reusing that image as your Gold Master. We can automatically re-trigger sysprep for you and all that type of stuff. So really handy on the Windows side.
Yeah, definitely.
We also have some other advanced options, and this is kind of a slight difference or subtle difference between what you might be used to in a vCenter UI. But the way this is modeled out is I can actually say, hey, this instance is one instance, but I've horizontally scaled it to 5 web servers. And so I can say, hey, I'll just do 2, for example, and it's actually going to provision 2 VMs within that instance, and you can track those independently. The other nice thing is if they're horizontally scaled for backup awareness, we know that critically, we only have to back up one of them because they're all the same.
Yeah.
So we can actually do that type of logic in the backup policy.
So it thinks of this as a pool of devices. So it recognizes they are the same instance, like they're clones of it. It's
Like
going to
a
increment the
scaling
host name, right? And then I know as a backup policy, I only need to back up one of them. So
Right.
That's super cool to have that intelligence built into it.
Yep, and you have additional options, and we can dig into these. We talked about those VirtIO drivers a little bit with Windows for attaching that.
Right.
Nested virtualization is supported, so maybe you want to
Provision
spin
a
up
hypervisor.
maybe you want to spin up a nested Hyper-V for testing, or a nested VMware, or even a nested HPE VM Essentials. You can do that. So we'll go ahead and hit next here. And then the last part is automation. So this goes back into some of the benefits of Morpheus, right? We left some of that stuff in there for VM Essentials, where you can say, hey, I also want to kick off a task as part of my provision.
Yeah.
It could be a task you use for, maybe you want to format disks a certain way on your VM, or maybe you have some policy where you have to install a backup agent. You can build in these tasks, Bash, PowerShell, those types of things, and then just leverage them from here. So I
think this is really important that you bring this up, because if you look at native vCenter, the capabilities within there, these are things that aren't available, and yet these are so valuable to an administrator or DevOps or whoever's kind of building this. This is a sampling, a subset of the full feature set you get with the full Morpheus experience. If I think about automation, orchestration, pre and post provisioning activities that I could do, but by providing this into our VM Essentials, we're providing differentiated capabilities that are going to be highly valued by administrators and consumers of this, leveraging this. So I think it's great that we have that capability, because these are common things that would drive an administrator batty.
Oh, yeah.
And to have it as a native part of the tool is phenomenal. The backups, I think, is yet another example
Configure
of that.
backups, and we'll actually dig into more of that later. I think we should dig into that later. There's some really cool stuff with that. And we also have integrations we're working with on Commvault, Cohesity, Veeam, things like that. So we actually already have all of those for the VMware side already. So if you want to use those, you can use those right now for VMware, and we'll be adding the others here. You can also just say, hey, I want 5 copies of this separately. So track them as 5 instances. I've already got, my factor 2, so I'm not going to,
fair enough,
throw a whole bunch into this environment right now.
All right, so it's kicked off now. You can see the 2 bars now.
Yeah, and it's actually already waiting for network on the first one. That's how fast it is. So
that's great.
That's actually starting up that VM. Now they're both already waiting for network. As a matter of fact, I can actually probably drill into those consoles already and start seeing stuff happen, right? See, it's kicking off cloud in it.
That's awesome.
They're ready to go. This is actually a great segue to the console, right? So we've got that hypervisor console capability built right in. You can pop it out. You can pop out multiple hypervisor consoles as well.
HTML5 interface, right? I can have direct access from the GUI.
Yep. I can actually also do guest console. So really cool about that is I get a native SSH client in the browser, or for Windows, a native RDP. I can do my clipboard copy paste right into it, all that type of stuff. I even get, it even does audio. So if you've got Windows and you want some audio playback, it works. Right, so it goes pretty deep on that. And while we're waiting on that, you can see it just moves so fast here.
While that's building, why don't you pop into a running VM?
Yeah.
And let's talk about just kind of the depth of visibility controls that you have, right? Kind of real world example. I've deployed, I've got a VM, I've got a workload running.
Perfect. Yeah, so this is actually a running VM I did earlier. You can see I've got some backup information. We'll get into that here in a minute. We got some current stats, what's the CPU usage, memory storage. And we can see some nice history trends and graphs, which is really handy for diagnosing issues we may have or identifying problems. But you can also drill deeper, right? So I can look at my storage volumes and see some IOPS performance. I can look at my configured networks. I can add networks and all that type of stuff. I can see my bandwidth going on. This is a pretty idle VM in this case.
Yeah.
And we also have backups built into the product. We don't just have third-party integrations. We realized that that's going to take some time, right, to get that all ready to go. And we knew that people were going to want some backup solution for a product coming to market like this. So we built an incremental backup system.
So it's not even just snapshots. You're actually doing incremental backups.
Yes, and we're direct streaming it from a host to your backup repository. It can be an NFS store, Windows file share. It can even be an S3 compatible bucket.
Perfect. So, stuff it in the cloud if I want.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Great.
And you can just, I can just hit restore and restore it right here to a new instance. And backing up is simple, just say, hey, backup, right? And that actually digs a little deeper. We also have synthetic full backup type stuff, right? So we've put in a little bit of thought into what you might want when you're dealing with incremental backups and things like that. So if I were to go to our actual backups UI, you can get a nice summary of all your backups going on.
Yeah.
Your jobs, your backups, and this actually ties in natively with all the other backup tools too. So Cohesity, all those tools, you can actually get visibility into those backup tools. So you can mix and match. Maybe you've got some dev test backup versus you want your enterprise grade backup.
Sure.
You've got the ability to do that.
That's great that you have the ability to segregate that and treat it separately.
Yeah, and actually here's that backup job we just kicked off, and I can drill into it, and wow, it's already basically done, right? So that's kicking off, and it's going to give me a size here in a little bit.
Again, native functionality built into the HPE VM Essentials.
Yeah.
Super cool.
And you can configure where it's stored, right? So we talked about NFS. In this case, we just have it configured for that. You can set up synthetic full schedules versus regular schedules. All that is a feature set capability of this.
That's great.
And actually, going back here, our other HP instance is up and running. So you can see here, we can actually do some cool lifecycle features, right? So maybe I want to resize it.
That's interesting. It's actually grouped because you launched two, so it treats that as a group. It recognizes these are part of a pool.
Exactly. And I can actually drill into those and configure them independently.
Sure.
Or I can say, you know what, this whole group, let's do some stuff to the whole group, right? I want to vertically scale my cluster. And it is hot resizable. Now, in this case, it is smart enough to know this. It gives you a warning if it can't be hot resizable.
Based on the OS or...
Well, in this case, we're going to 4 gigs of RAM. So when you go from 2 to 4, it needs that.
Sure.
Needs that reboot. But beyond that, it'll just keep adding, hot adding. Cores can be hot added, memory, all that type of stuff.
Yeah, great.
Now, without doing that, and let's see if I can drill it down here. I can leave it at the 1 CPU, 2 gig. I can also hot move it. Like maybe I want to move data stores without it going down. So I can just hit that button, and it's going to go off and do that for both those workloads for us here.
Right.
So it's going to start and kick that off, and you'll see more of those kick off as it goes. And and while we're talking about that, is I can actually go to that hypervisor console, and you can see here, right? We're good to go.
Yeah.
Right. So it's responding. It's not locking up. All that type of capability.
So it's actually a good call. Like we've talked about VM provisioning, the depth and granularity and capabilities I have with VM, image management, treating these as a pool, the backup retention. Shift hats for me for a moment and think about it as a cluster admin, right? The cloud admin type of persona. Managing the clusters themselves. We've talked about it from a feature set, but what does that really mean if I support a vMotion equivalent, right? Live migration, or how do I think about, you actually showed kind of storage migration, how am I going to move that, but how do I think about managing those clusters. I need to take a hypervisor node out of service. I'm going to patch it. I'm going to do some maintenance on it. Like, what are the capabilities that we've built into the solution here?
Sure, let's actually drill into the cluster and take a look at that. So we were actually here earlier, I believe. And we talked about, we can see some of the high-level stuff, the overall IOPS performance, memory, CPU, health, and any alarms that are actually known will actually show up here as well. We don't have any alarms in this cluster right now, so it's good to go.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, that's a good thing. You can actually see all your hosts, and you can drill into your hosts. So we talked about maintenance of the cluster. What if I've got to do some maintenance on VME01, and I've got my VMs running on that, right? So you can actually see it's got a couple VMs, some stopped ones, some running ones, things like that.
Yeah.
I can actually just go over here and enter maintenance mode. And it's going to go assess if it can enter maintenance mode. And basically, if you've got pinned VMs, it'll actually stop you and say, hey, you need to go fix that first.
Right.
And it'll actually tell you here things will be moved for you, and you hit confirm. And it's now kicking off a maintenance operation.
So it's going to drain all the traffic off of that host, distribute it onto the rest of the cluster, take it out of circulation, right? So no new workloads get deployed on it.
Exactly.
And then it'll tell us when we're ready, and then we can do what we need to with it.
Yeah, and you'll see that in history as well.
You mentioned pinning. I think that's an interesting concept too, right? So even out of the box, we have that ability to kind of enforce some things of affinity or anti-affinity. If you want to pin VMs to a specific host, or I want to intentionally make sure that VMs aren't on the same host, that type of capability in this kind of first release is great to have.
Oh, that's actually a good one about affinity. So we'll be adding more to affinity and anti-affinity as we go, but it's worth noting that horizontally scaled instance we did where it had 2 VMs,
right.
It's aware of that. It knows they're together, so it actually tries to keep them on separate hosts for you automatically. If there's not capacity for that, it can bunch them up, but it'll automatically always ensure there's a DRS service that's constantly analyzing and making sure the cluster is balanced.
Which is great too, right? Again, we think about common lexicon, right? People will be familiar with VMware terms. From a DRS, we have the same type of an experience where it's going to be constantly bin packing and redistributing workloads across the cluster. So as workloads are spun up or torn down, you don't have something asymmetrically scaled, right? You can continue to load balance and provide optimal performance, but because of that live migration capability, without interrupting service to the VMs. So.
Exactly, and we talked about placement. You go, this is one of those VMs. We can go here and actually go to manage placement. So we can say, hey, I actually want this to be on host 2, right? But DRS could rebalance it on us, right? So it's going to do its thing, and that's what this placement strategy is I can actually say, no, I want it to stay on VME2. And you have a couple modes. You can say failover mode, meaning stay there unless host 2 goes down.
Okay.
Which actually probably a good thing to bring up is there is HA failover built into the cluster.
Right.
Yep.
So if I lose a hypervisor, those workloads will automatically be respawned on a different hypervisor.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic.
Yep. And you can do that with Quorum on your data store, and you can use that as your heartbeat. And then also Morpheus will monitor it for you. There's little agents running on those hosts that's doing the work. But if Morpheus goes down, those agents take over, and they automatically do the Quorum checking for you.
That's great.
So, we can also do pinned.
So you're going to force it to stand there no matter what.
Yeah.
Don't move this VM.
Yep, and that'll actually stop your maintenance mode too. It'll say, hey, you've got a pinned VM there.
Perfect.
Yeah, make sure you do something. What do you want to do about that before I take it out? So
That's
I can just hit save. And I just pinned this to host 2. So if we wait a second, here I'll just refresh. It might have just happened that fast. Oh, no, here it is. We can see it's live moving that VM for us.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Maybe a last area just to touch on is from a networking perspective, right? We think about kind of software-defined networking and where those capabilities are. For a lot of VMware customers, this is a choice point, right? Am I going full VCF with NSX, but I don't need or want a lot of that feature capability. But I think you guys have done some really cool stuff to provide some of that baseline functionality and capability that customers are looking for.
Yeah, if you're looking at like vCenter, for example, you don't have all of NSX, right? You're just doing VLANs and that layer 2 type of networking. So you do have that all in here right away. You can go into network and say, hey, I want to add a new OVS port group. We use Open vSwitch.
Open vSwitch, yeah, great.
And very similar concept, right, to a distributed switch port group. You can just actually say, hey, I want to add a new one, give it a VLAN ID, and it's going to use that host bridge, which you can actually define host bridges. Think of that like your distributed switch, tied to the interface on the host, right? So once that's done, you can also actually additionally provide information about the network. Remember, VM Essentials does more than just provision a VM on a network. It can automate the guest OS awareness of that network.
Even if I'm not using an external IPAM, I actually have
built-in IPAM
or DHCP
too.
Or however I want to kind of manage that. So
yeah, that's actually a great thing to point out. Another small benefit is if you don't have an IPAM yet, don't worry about it. We have one for you. Right? I can just say, hey, let's add an IP pool.
Manage those pools.
Yep. So great call out there. Yeah, so that's a lot of how that works, and we're working on overlay networks and things like that down the line. We're excited to start doing that.
Yeah. David, thank you. This has been a fantastic overview, and I know we're literally just giving you the kind of the speed view of this, but hopefully this has given you a taste of the depth and capabilities of this exciting new offering. We're really excited to bring HPE VM Essentials to market. Really excited about the path going forward. Initial feedback from customers that have gone through our beta program has been overwhelmingly positive. And hopefully you've seen this is real, it scales, it works. We're really excited about it. Thanks again.